Hi, today I'm going to show you a really simple and easy way to have a debugging mode within your game where you can turn off and on all of these line traces and debug spheres and any other logging and debugging that you want with one little checkbox. Okay, so I've fired up the first person template. I've added a couple of extra little bits. So I added these fires. They've got a debug sphere around them, as you can see, so that we could use this to denote where we take damage if we moved into them or something like that. I've turned the sound off on the firing because it's really loud, and I've made it so that when we shoot, the line trace, I've made it so it traces the line and the trace is visible. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a blueprint class, and we're going to make a game instance. So we'll select that, and I'll call it example game instance. And then we'll go to project settings, and we need to tell the project to use our new game instance. So if we come to project settings, maps and modes, if you don't see it, you should see game instance. Just click that title there and it'll drop down, and then we need to select the one we just created, example game instance. Obviously you can call it whatever you want. So I'll save that and close it, and then we're going to open up that blueprint. Now there's a couple of things you need to know about game instances. They don't work the same way as normal classes. Normal classes, when you load a level, are brought into a level with their default set, and then when you end the level, they're destroyed. And in the new level, even if you've got the same class, they're brought up and they don't have the same, they don't carry settings or any changes that you made to them between levels. Game instance does. It persists from the time you start the game to the time that you end the entire game, not just your level. So you can use it to store data while the entire game's on. So one of the first things to be loaded, it's one of the last things to be closed, to be shut down. There are some functions in here that get called on shutdown and start. We're not going to be touching those today, but that's where you'd want to load and save certain settings, such as loading in the player's graphical settings or high scores and things like that. But what we're going to do is we're going to create just one variable. We're going to call it debug mode, and it's going to be a boolean. We'll hit compile and save, and we'll set it to be true. And then we're going to create a new function called get debug. Capital G, debug. D-E-B-U-G, I can't type today apparently. We're going to make it a pure function, and we're just going to tell it use this to return the debug. I like to use helper functions for a lot of this sort of stuff. In fact, I'm going to change that to be debug mode. It makes things a lot easier when you come to, if you decide to change the way things work, obviously you can just change them within that function, and if other things are referencing that function. If we, for example, wanted to remove this variable entirely, it wouldn't break everything. We'd just change the way this function worked, and everything would carry on as if nothing happened. So that's nice and simple. So what we can do is we can go into our fire, and in the event begin play, I've just made it create the debug sphere. It's at the actor's location. It's got a radius of 100, and the duration is seconds. I've just whacked that really to a really high number, so we don't want to be calling it or generating every tick because it just costs extra resources and it ends up a bit messy. There's no way to just say just last for a tick, or a frame, sorry, which should sort of be maybe a little bit better of a way. If things start moving, these debug spheres they're not really designed to move around with stuff, so it can get a bit messy. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a branch, and because we only want this to actually be shown when we've got debugging turned on. What we also need to do is we need to get our game instance. Always scroll down, and we need to make it into our new class. So we need to cast it to example game instance. By default, when you use that, call that get game instance, it comes in as the base game instance class. I'm not quite sure why that is, but it just is. So you have to always remember to cast it. We could at a later date create a helper function to do this, but you can run into some weird issues with doing that and sort of the way they work. So we'll pull this off and we'll get debug. We need to make sure to get the function, not the variable, and we'll save that. So now when debugging is turned on, these things will show, the little fire spheres. But if we decide to turn debugging off, which is here, we'll compile, save, and play. The debug spheres are gone. But our ray trace, our line trace lines are still there. So now we're going to create another little function to hide those. What we need to do is we'll go into example game instance and we'll create another function. We'll call it line trace show. Again, we'll make this a pure function. We're going to make this one return a byte. So what we're going to do is we're going to pass the enum of a line trace. So show setting, I think we'll call this. If I go into the first person character blueprint, which is in here, this is the line trace on the basically on the click. I've just added it to the end. The first person blueprint doesn't actually use a line trace, but to make things nice and easy. And on here on draw debug type, you can have it show none for 1 frame, for a duration which I believe is 30 seconds, and persistent, which will just always show that line trace. Obviously, we want it persistent when we've got debugging on, but we don't want it to be none when it's not. We could just do a branch and have 2 enums and pass in 1 enum or another set of variable and do it that way. But that's just sort of adding lots and lots of things. We'd have to do this every time we did a line trace. So what we're going to do instead is we're going to make a function to just return the correct enum. So what we want is, if we pass here line trace, and it is trace. Is it trace? Yes. Literal enum draw debug trace. So if we get is a literal, what a literal is basically the words that are attached to that enum. Obviously, an enum is just a single number, a byte. But the literal is the actual word that is being given a name. So we'll make a persistent. What we're going to do is we're going to duplicate this. We want one for none as well. I just click. If I hold Alt and if you hold Alt and click on an exec, you disconnect it, and then we'll do a branch, and we can just use the get debug mode. So that'll tell you when debugging is true, we're going to make it persistent, and when debugging is false, we're going to return none. This is a pure function, so we can hit save and compile. If we go back to our first person character blueprint, if I just go to fire, we can get the game instance. We'll just copy and paste this over here because I'm lazy. And we'll take the exec. We need to obviously cast to it first. Now, something to be aware of, or a little bit cautious of with these sorts of things. Always make sure to link up the cast failed as well as the cast is true, because obviously, if this isn't being set, so if we were to just link up here, if the cast failed, the line trace wouldn't go off. For whatever reason, the cast shouldn't fail, but occasionally errors happen. So what we'll do is we'll link up the cast failed as well, and then we'll just move this over here a little bit more, give some more space, and we want to get I've not enabled line trace show. Is that a public function? Line trace show, that's why, because I didn't type the right thing in. So we'll just, same again, it needs to be cast, so you take the game instance, cast it. This time we'll just get the line trace show function instead. We've made it a pure function, so we don't need to pass an exec to it, and then we'll just pass that to here. This conversion that comes out, basically what's happening is that in the game instance, we're taking a literal enum, and it's making it a byte, and then which is a single number, so the setting's coming out as a byte. This takes the same E number again, so it creates this little it does a little conversion. There isn't really a way to pass a specific E number. It doesn't really matter. You're easier better passing it around as a byte anyway. It's a bit less memory to be used and whatnot. And then that's it, basically done. So if we go back to play now, you can see our fire's not there. Our line trace isn't there either. Although the line trace is still happening in the background, but it's just not showing. If we hit escape, we turn debug mode back on, and we can hit play, and the line trace is there. So you can use this type of behavior to, say you wanted to display on here your health on the current health, or that you'd walked into something. You could have another function similar to how we just done the line trace function to if to show text or not, that sort of thing. If to log, all sorts of different stuff like this for your debugging.